Hi, and thanks for watching. This is the second in a short series on the introduction to the internal arts. And today I wanted to talk briefly about a practical perspective on Qi. Now, when we're talking about the internal arts, specifically I'm thinking of the ones I'm familiar with from the Chinese tradition, which of course is Qigong, Tai Chi, Bagua Xingyi. And so when we start looking at the internal arts, any of these internal arts, it's not very long before we start coming across this concept of Qi cultivation, training the Qi, building the Qi. And there's a question of how do we incorporate this into our practice? Now there tends to be, because it's an unfamiliar term in Western thought, it's a borrowed term. It doesn't have an easy translation, so therefore it's called Qi, or if it's coming from a Japanese tradition, it's called Ki. In either of these cases, because it's a foreign concept, it tends to get either dismissed as something that must be a misunderstanding, or else elevated into something that is esoteric and magical and unexplainable. What I'd like to suggest is that there's actually a practical basis that we can use to look at and incorporate this idea of Qi in our training, which I think is perhaps a little more straightforward and helpful for our practice. The starting point for this is simply how we feel, for example, when we wake up in the morning. If we're well rested, we wake up and we feel like we have energy. If we had a terrible night, we wake up, we feel tired. We feel tired, we get up, we stumble around, we get a cup of coffee. After we had the cup of coffee though, then our energy comes up. Or through the day, if we're having a good day, our energy can actually increase and feel better. We can feel more confident and motivated. If we're having a bad day with lots of frustrations, we can feel that energy and motivation drop down. And again, we can go and have a hit of caffeine from coffee or chocolate or tea, and then suddenly the mood starts to improve a little bit and the energy level comes up. So these fluctuations in how we feel, our actual experience in our bodies and in our lives, is a reflection of our Qi. This is a very general state of Qi, but nonetheless the overall sum of how our Qi is can be reflected as simply as this. This is sometimes easy to overlook just because it's such a familiar experience. And then when we get into some of the theories and training ideas within the internal arts, it starts to get a little more specific, starts to get a little more detailed. For example, I'll use for example, the discussion around not just Qi in general, but Qi in specific channels or specific organs, moving in particular directions. Though I think this still can relate back to a practical experience. The example that I'll draw on, is so the standard bearer for Chen Tai Chi, Chen Lei. He has a book that describes all the movements. And in the book, he'll describe the internal dynamics for each move. When it comes to the punch, the cover fist and punch posture here, right, coming through, he'll describe the internal motion. And in it, he quotes a classic. His description is that it starts always in the dantian, in the lower abdomen, and then descends down to the leg. The quote from the classic is that from the foot, it ascends through the leg, coming to the kidneys. It's guided by the waist, and then, or directed by the waist, and guided to the shoulder and elbow, and then emitted by the hand. Sounds pretty fantastic. And it sounds quite specific. It is also, when you have become familiar with the move, it is actually just the experience of performing the move. When you come through, it is something where from the lower abdomen you set the weight down. It sets down into the foot, and from that contact to the ground, the movement comes up, directed through the leg, through the back, coming across, and then guided from the back through to the shoulder, and then is emitted out to the hand. you could say that, well, then it's just a fancy way of talking about the biomechanics. Though I would say that's not quite accurate. It's taking the biomechanics and then incorporating the engagement of our experience. So we take the conscious and the non-conscious part of our mind and engage it with the movement. And when all of these things line up, then the experience of how it feels in first person, our actual experience, is one which matches this description of the flow of the Qi. I should mention the conscious and non-conscious aspects. This is neuroscience talk in some ways, or to translate it into, for people who are familiar with neuroscience, this is the idea of system 1 cognition, system 2 cognition, or hot cognition and cold cognition. So this is the idea that the cold cognition, or system 2, is the conscious part, the parts where we have our thought and our conscious control. And this is supported and held, underlaid by everything else, which is actually the bulk of our neuroprocessing, our cognitive. In a practical sense, what it's actually talking about is when we practice something again and again and again, and we work it into our muscle memory. And so that the details of the movement are no longer occupy the conscious part of our brain, but has been downloaded to the system 2 part, and the automatic muscle memory takes over, which then allows our conscious part, system 2, to switch from thinking about things to sensing and guiding and coordinating and reflecting on how the whole dynamic works. And this intersection, the engagement of the cognition, the entire of the cognition, with our physical form as it goes through the movements, this is the experience of the Qi. But of course, this is a long and complicated way of describing something where the internal arts, the Chinese traditions, have come up with a much simpler and more direct way of talking about it and saying, oh yeah, there's a Qi, and the Qi sets down, and then it comes up and is guided through, and then it's expressed this way. So there is our concept of Qi. When we get into Qi training, often this is done with postures and done with breath work. And of course, this is because of this engagement that we want to do. We want to engage our mind with our body, bring our awareness back into how we hold our body, how the forces are traveling through the body, how the movement and the dynamic motion is coordinated between the different segments, between the weight transfer, between our sensation and our experience. And of course, with breath work is this perfect bridge between these same three elements: the conscious part of our thinking, the non-conscious part of our cognition, our neurology, and then, of course, our body, our physical form as well. And so, again, we come back to this idea that these are very practical, lived experiences that we then try and find words to describe. And a convenient way of talking about it is by talking about this concept of Qi and its sensation as we do these practices. So with all of that talking, maybe we should look at a practice that is involved as an example. So we'll do the first move from the 8 silk brocades, double hands supporting the heavens. Right. For this move, we're standing upright, shoulders set down, low back relaxed, weight on the heels. The left foot steps out to the side. Feet parallel, just hip width apart. Hands at our sides. We set our weight down, bending our knees slightly. We set our shoulders down and extend our fingers. We then turn our palms out, bringing the arms up and overhead. 2. With the palms facing up. We press the palms, lift the center of gravity, and then from there we lift our heels just a little bit up off the ground. Straighten the wrists, lower the heels, Bring the arms back out to the sides and down. That same motion a second time. Again, weight over the heels. Relax, set the weight into the feet, into the heels. Open across the chest as we turn our palms out. Raise the hands up, keep the center of gravity down until the palms are facing up. Press the palms, lift the spine, lift the heels just a little bit. Extend to the fingertips. Set the heels on the ground, gradually relax the shoulders and allow the hands to return to our sides. 2 more times that same thing, setting down. Opening the arms up. Pressing the palms, lifting the heels. Fingertips pointing overhead. Set the heels down. Relax the shoulders, lower the arms. Hands coming back to our sides. 1 more time, looking at the breath work, breathing out. As the arms come up, gradually breathing in. Breathing out, pressing the palms up. Extend to the fingertips. Set the heels down. Lower the arms, breathing in. And close. Very good. One last important thing to mention. I mentioned this detail about breath work and about the postures as a way to sense the qi dynamic. When it comes to beginning lessons, even intermediate lessons, and the instruction, very often this is not the main focus. Very often discussion around breathwork, discussion around the qi dynamic is not emphasized. Depends on the class, depends on the teacher. But I think this is not by accident. Often at the beginning, the emphasis is on finding the structure, finding the coordination of the movement, and as I was referring to before, this whole process of getting the movement from the conscious directed part of the brain into the muscle memory, into the automatic part of our cognitive function. And that is the first step. And it's only after that stage has been reasonably acquired that then these additional ideas around breath work and around qi cultivation start to become something that makes sense. So I hope this information is helpful for you. Keep training, keep practicing, and take care.